time for a break from the elite professional-grade cameras and look at this crowd favorite, the Canon AE-1. It's so advanced, it's simple. The date is now January 1974. The Canon product development team was formed under the title of New Model X Development Plan. 28 months later, the AE-1 was introduced and it had the mass market squarely in its sights. According to Canon, AE-1 stands for Automated Electronic Photographic System No. 1. Because it was the first microprocessor-equipped SLR, it had many other innovations, such as a great TV advertising campaign.
I get it too. Even with the zoom, the Canon AE-1 is as easy as focus and click.
So advanced, it's simple.
The year is 1976. Jimmy Carter wins the presidential race.
I told you I didn't intend to lose.
North Vietnam reunites with South Vietnam. The Concorde takes off. The laser printer is introduced by IBM.
All the controls and guide marks you will use when threading and adjusting the paper
Apple I is launched, and Canon AE-1 starts production that lasts 8 years until 1984. 1976 is a good representative of the nostalgic 70s. It's the post-Watergate era. So we're watching All the President's Men?
Former Attorney General, the highest-ranking law enforcement officer in this country, is a crook.
Their reputations.
Or a lonely taxi driver who is growing detached from reality.
Oh, yeah?
You will never see a more chilling performance than this.
This is the pre-internet era, when TV networks were dominant. TV is where we got our worldview.
Stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
This was the era of intense competition between camera manufacturers. Who, you may ask? You know who. The Germans were still asleep after a decade, probably dreaming of the glory days of mechanical rangefinder cameras. The half-hearted attempts at producing SLRs were very slow, and each model produced was at least 5 years behind the competition. Here is our camera chronology chart. Blue is Canon and red is Nikon. Let me sort by date. Canon and others were very busy in the 70s. We see multiple models each year. Then in 1976, we see Canon AT-1, a version of AE-1 for the export market, only manual without automatic exposure. Canon F1N, the new version of Canon Professional F1, which I demonstrated in this video. Pentax MX and ME, the smallest and lightest 35mm full-frame SLR cameras yet. Pentax K1000, another huge crowd favorite, produced for 22 years and sold 3 million units. And of course, we have Canon AE-1, which sold 5.7 million units in less than half that time. Canon AE-1 was the first in a serious overhaul of the Canon SLR lineup. Since 1950s, Canon was overshadowed by Nikon. Canon SLRs did not have the professional features of top Nikon cameras. However, Canon easily led in the amateur fixed lens market where Nikon didn't compete. When AE-1 was launched, it became the champion of the amateur-level Canon A-series of SLRs. They all had the same chassis with different features and cosmetic top panel differences. AE-1 for the first time used a significant amount of structural plastic to make it lighter and cheaper. The use of injection-molded ABS plastic was well disguised, for example for the top panel, which was finished with satin chrome or black enamel to make it look like metal. It fools even experienced reviewers. The bottom plate, however, was brass with chrome or black painted finish. The use of electronics instead of mechanical systems reduced the part count by more than 300 elements. It wasn't just any old electronics, it was the first use of dedicated integrated circuits or IC chips that was significant. The design was modular in a way that allowed automated production lines and further reduction in costs. At first, there was an outcry regarding excessive automation, ruining the art of photography, people said. However, automation proved to be the way to attract the amateurs to photography, leading to big sales numbers.
The AE-1 is so simple, you can really concentrate on your subject. About all you do is focus and click. Canon AE-1. So advanced, it's simple.
Canon AE-1 used the older FD lens mount. When Canon eventually abandoned the FD lens lineup to move to EF lenses, it did not provide backward compatibility. So that was the end of the AE-1 and the other A-series cameras.
It adjusts
In
itself
1981, 5 years after AE-1, Canon released its successor, AE-1 program.
Focus and shoot.
The program mode
Canon
was brought from
AE-1
Canon
plus
A1
program.
to Canon AE-1.
So advanced, so simple.
If you recall from this video, AE-1 was the first PASM camera. AE-1 program supports a total of 8 interchangeable focusing screens. It is a little more maintenance intensive. It has the same shutter limit of 1/1000th of a second, and the flash sync is still the slow 1/60th of a second. It is regarded as more difficult to repair than the original AE-1. How did Canon conquer the challenges of affordability and convenience? There are 4 ways that Canon chose to achieve affordability. Strategy 1. Simplify the design. Use electronics and first microprocessor. Canon also made calculators at the time and collaborated with Texas Instruments to improve the microprocessors. They used these advances in the camera chips. This resulted in eliminating 25% of the camera parts, also a more modular design suitable for automatic assembly. Strategy 2. Use cheaper and fewer materials. Using plastic with a layer of iron oxide followed by chrome or black paint to emulate metal finish. Mirror lockup and multiple exposure and various security locks were also eliminated. Strategy 3. Lower labor costs. They used various robots to replace humans at certain parts of the assembly process. This lowered the manpower cost and increased consistency. These 3 techniques are collectively called value engineering. There was one final strategy: TV marketing. Marketing using athletes to imply pros use AE-1, like John Newcomb. AE-1 allows you to be creative. AE-1 makes photography easy. AE-1 is affordable, and it is for you. After Canon AE-1, other camera manufacturers followed the 4-point success formula of Canon. The camera body is a combination of aluminum alloy and plastic. Its weight is 590 grams, which feels suitably substantial in the hand. The film advance lever has a standoff position of 30 degrees and a swing of 120 degrees, which is relatively short. There is no multiple exposure provision. The shutter release button is electromagnetic. It has a half press mode for activating the light meter. Full press to take the picture. It can also take a mechanical cable release. The small lever around the shutter release has 3 modes. Center means on. Forward will reveal a little LED light, and when you press the shutter release, it activates a 10-second electronic self-timer which blinks. Unlike the mechanical self-timers, this self-timer does not self-cancel after it's used. You have to cancel it yourself, otherwise all your shots will go on the 10-second delay. Backward means off. Interestingly, even though the shutter release is electronic, the off position is a mechanical lock, not an electronic lock. I wonder why. The frame counter counts up. The first shot is orange number 0 to confuse you. In other cameras, where the frame counter starts with number 1, the last shot on a 36 roll is 36. Here, when you start with 0, your last shot on a 36 roll is 35. What? Please, can someone provide a powerful logic for this feature? Are you talking to me? No, I was talking to myself, don't worry. The shutter is an electronically controlled horizontal cloth focal plane shutter. Not as good as metal shutters of some cameras, but functional and inexpensive. The shutter speeds are from 2 full seconds to 1/1000th of a second plus B and X flash. There are 2 number 2s on the dial. The one that is 2 full seconds is colored orange. The other one is 1/2 seconds or half a second, which is white like the others. Shutter synchronization is a relatively slow 1/60th of a second, and the dial has a flash symbol next to it. In practice, the slow shutter sync may not matter to the average user, as the electronic flash will fire at much higher speed than 1/60th of a second. So the main subject, if it's mainly lit by the flash, should be okay. The ISO range is from 25 to 3200. It's marked as ASA, American Standards Association, which is the same as ISO, International Standards Organization. You need to pull the shutter dial up and rotate to set the ISO with 1/3 stops. But there's a plastic guard in front of the shutter dial, so you have to pull the advance lever to the standoff position, then grab the two sides of the dial at approximately 2 o'clock and 8 o'clock and lift it up equally on both sides and turn. Sometimes you find that the ISO is stuck to the shutter dial, so as you turn, the whole thing turns, including the ISO numbers. What you do is you keep turning until the ISO dial gets to the end of the run, then turn even more. Now the ISO dial stays while the shutter dial moves. You force the white index to match the ISO you want. This will work in both directions, whichever one is stuck. The viewfinder has a field of view of 93.5% vertical and 96% horizontal. Magnification is 0.86 with the standard lens at infinity. Viewfinder attachments include angle finder A2 and B, magnifier S, and 10 types of diopter adjustment lenses, also a rubber eye cup 4S. Focusing screen is standard split image with microprism ring. It's not replaceable. The light meter is a silicon photocell. Light metering system is TTL or through the lens and center weighted. The camera is optimized for automatic aperture. Manual mode is available but is not ideal, as we will see. When you want to use AE-1 in the shutter priority automatic exposure mode, which is the default, you have to rotate this dial until it gets to the A. To lock it on the A, you press this button. Select your shutter speed, for example 125, aim and shoot. Very simple. If you want to use it in the manual mode, you have to press this button and rotate aperture dial. Select the aperture and the shutter that you want. You look inside to see if it agrees with the needle. The needle is giving you the recommendation, but you don't have to follow it. Canon AE-1 light metering system has only one needle showing the recommended automatic aperture in the shutter priority mode. In the manual mode, you cannot use the shutter or aperture dials to match a target for correct exposure. Since in the manual mode, the aperture dial doesn't move the meter needle, you have to read the recommended aperture in the viewfinder, remember it, then look outside at the lens and set the aperture yourself. Alternatively, first select the aperture manually and remember what you selected. Then look inside the viewfinder and rotate the shutter dial until the needle moves to the aperture stop that you memorized. That will be the right exposure. But at this point, you cannot see what shutter speed you selected inside the viewfinder, so you have to look outside and check again to see if it's not too slow for handheld shots. If not, you have to change this again to something else. Look again. Rotate this again to something more respectable, like 1/60th of a second. You have to constantly look inside, then outside, then outside, then inside again. AE-1 also does not have a proper exposure compensation selector. There is a kind of exposure compensation button, which is fixed at plus 1.5 stops. This is the chrome button on the left side. It is best described as a backlight button to compensate to a fixed extent for backlighting conditions. If you want exposure compensation on a different value or on a negative side, hack the ISO setting temporarily. To see the needle inside, you have to half press this button. If you don't want to do that, there's another way. You press this button over here. That does the same thing. Overall, I would say AE-1 is not very good at manual mode. So as a training camera for photography enthusiasts, it's not ideal. I know a lot of reviewers describe it as a good learner's camera, but I'm not convinced. This camera is good for everyday life, like a phone camera today, not for learning the art and science of photography. It's a good, competent consumer camera. The camera has a hot shoe with plastic cover that doubles as opener for battery chamber. On the front, there is another flash sync socket, which according to Canon is JIS-B or Japan Industrial Standard B. As far as I can tell, it's identical to the PC Sync German standard socket from Prontor and Compor, both Carl Zeiss subsidiaries. With the Canon Speedlight, which is Canon's name for flashlight, the shutter speed and aperture are automatically set and the amount of light is automatically controlled. By the way, Nikon also calls flash units Speedlight, but with a different spelling. The camera back can be removed to install the accessory Data Back A. The standard back only has a memo holder for the film box tab to remind you of the chosen film. The bottom of the camera has a tripod socket and the motor winder connection points. This is the lid for the motor winder, not the battery chamber. This one is the electronic contact. This is a button you press to rewind the film. It pops out again next time you advance the film. The battery chamber is on the front with a flimsy plastic cover which doubles as a hand grip. It takes one 4LR44 or 4SR44 battery, which should last around 1 year with normal use. If you cannot conveniently find these batteries, just use 4 separate LR44 batteries, which are easier to find in real physical shops, plus 3 little metal washers of the same diameter to make up the length. You can also watch this video to see exactly how. The camera will not work at all without the battery. Battery power can be verified by pressing the battery check button and looking at the light meter needle. It works in the opposite direction of what you might have guessed. If the needle is below the index mark, it means the battery is good. If the needle goes above the index mark, it doesn't mean it has extra power. It means the battery is too weak and should be replaced. So this battery check needle works in the opposite direction to your car fuel gauge. Down means more and up means less. What were they thinking? Anyone knows?
You talking to me? You talking to me?
No, not you. No, thank you. The plastic battery cover is the weakest element of the whole camera, and there are probably hundreds of thousands of these cameras with broken plastic battery cover. If you're lucky to have a good one, be very careful opening it. Canon has seen this problem and provided a multi-function hot shoe cover that doubles as the battery cover opener. Press the fine edge of the hot shoe cover into the little hole and press. The chamber will pop open. Don't use it like a bottle opener or a lever action. If your camera did not come with one of these, use a little sharp thing, like this wooden skewer to press. Don't try to force it open with your nails. To load the battery, it's recommended to remove the lens so the battery cover does not hit the lens, which makes it difficult. Canon AE-1 uses FD lenses, both the breech lock type from 1971 and the later FDN bayonet type, but it's not compatible with the EF lenses. It can also use the earlier FL lenses, but with stop-down metering only. Stopping down the lens for depth of field preview is possible by pushing the stop-down button. If you want to keep the depth of field pressed in, push it as far as it goes and a chrome button pops up to hold it in place. Then if you want to release it, press that chrome button in. Film loading is the most conventional method and easy. Pull up the rewind knob to open the back. No need for a security lock because no one is silly enough to pull this knob all the way up accidentally. There is a multi-slot take-up spool. Put the end of the film in one of the slots, wind a little until you see the end of the film come around. As an option, give the film a little more tension to straighten it. Then close the back and do a few blank shots until the frame counter goes from S to 0. Now you're ready for the first real shot. To rewind, press the rewind button, lift the rewind crank, then rotate until you feel the end of the film released. You can open at this time and leave a little leader out of the cartridge if you want to develop it yourself. Alternatively, wind even more until all the film goes into the cartridge. The main accessories for AE-1 were Winder A with a 2 frames per second shooting speed, Power Winder A2, Data Back A for sequential numbering and date stamp on the film. Canon AE-1, like almost every camera, has a few problems and booby traps. For example, Google Canon squeal and you'll see a lot of responses. It's something caused by dried out lubricant on the mirror flywheel damper assembly. If you're keen and careful, you can fix it yourself or just live with it. The other is glitchy electronics. For those, I would not bother to attempt repair. Out of the original 5.7 million Canon AE-1s, several million are still in circulation, so there's no shortage of supply. Just get another one. Booby trap number 1. If you accidentally or intentionally set the self-timer mode, then change your mind, the immediate and logical instinct would be to return the lever back to on or off position. But if you do that, the camera will immediately shoot a picture rather than cancel. Oops, one shot wasted. To cancel the self-timer correctly, you need to press the battery check button on the other side of the camera top. Now, can you possibly guess or remember that unintuitive solution? No, don't say it.
Well, who the hell else are you talking? Talking to me? Well, I'm the only one here.
Booby trap number 2. If you set the self-timer, the camera will measure the light immediately after you press the shutter release button, even though the shot is taken 10 seconds later. So, don't stand in front of the camera and press the shutter release button. Otherwise, you'll be measuring the light off your belly instead of the actual scene. While we're on this subject, if you're using the self-timer, your eye is not on the viewfinder, so stray light can get into the viewfinder, bounce off the pentaprism, and affect the correct light measuring. Here's where the clever multifunction hot shoe cover comes to the rescue. Yet another low-tech use of this little plastic tab is to slot over the viewfinder and block the light. I confidently say that out of 5.7 million produced, 5 million of these little plastic tabs have been lost. Booby trap number 3. This button should only be pressed after advancing the film. Otherwise, according to Canon, the lens will show the aperture of the previous shot, not the current one that you have just selected. What? Does it have some kind of memory? Booby trap number 4. Unlike earlier cameras, such as Canon F1, the clever FD lens stop-down metering mode is not allowed. To use stop-down metering, press the multifunction lever towards the camera. Now, you find that the shutter speed, the aperture setting, and the ISO setting will move the needle up or down. Your target is now the fixed index. Match the needle to the fixed index, and you will have correct exposure. That would have given a full-featured manual mode to AE-1. However, we're out of luck. In short, in AE-1 with FD lenses, only metering with full open aperture is permitted, not the stop-down mode. Strangely, this useful feature is available with the earlier FL lenses, giving us the full manual mode. Strange indeed. Booby trap number 5. This is the weirdest one. Let's say you're learning how to use this camera. So you're experimenting with different things, and you come across this thing called depth of field. You try to press that, it doesn't go in. Is the camera defective? And you realize depth of field doesn't make any sense unless you choose one of these apertures. The automatic setting doesn't work, so you can't actually press that in. Okay, so you put that on something really small like 22. Now you press that, it goes all the way in, and it even locks if you want. And you look inside, it goes dark, and it shows you maximum depth of field. Well, all good. Yeah, that makes sense. So maybe you put this on a slow speed and on f22, and you take a shot. You check inside that the meter concurs. All good. Fine, I've learned that one. Then you put it back onto something more sensible, 250 over here, and put it back onto automatic mode, which is what this camera is designed for, and you take another shot. Okay, the camera is supposed to automatically set the aperture, and it's a pretty good shutter speed for daylight, and your shot is ruined. What? Did we commit some crime here? What do you think? Did we do anything wrong? With the knowledge of any other camera, you would not say you did anything wrong. But let me explain. When you were playing around with these apertures, say 22, the moment that you press this in, the CPU recorded 22 as your choice. Now that memory is sticky. It stays there. Later on, when you put this back onto A, did it think of erasing that? No, it still thinks you're on 22. So when you put this on 250, it's still shooting at 22. That first shot on the A mode will still be on 22, not on the A mode. Okay, what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to take this into the manual mode and go all the way to the widest aperture and go back again all the way to the A. That action is required to erase the memory. Don't believe me? Here's the manual. Well hidden. It is unbelievable, right?
I want you to get up right now. Go to your windows, stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not gonna take this anymore.
If you have a few cameras, you're very likely to be affected by this because it's really not common. Guys, let's face it. This is designed for the automatic mode. Don't expect too much. Conclusion. Canon AE-1 doesn't pretend to be a professional camera or even a backup for professional cameras. There are better choices for that. AE-1 is a Casio watch that you buy from the supermarket rather than from a G-Shock store. AE-1 is a Nokia 6610, the original mass-market phone. It's not iPhone 1. AE-1 is not a BMW or a Tesla. It is the Volkswagen, or the people's car.
Volkswagen.
So, AE-1 is the people's camera, a long-lasting favorite at the time and a second-hand market today. It is easy and foolproof to use in the automatic mode. It has tons of inexpensive but high-quality FD lenses available, and it keeps its value better than almost all of its peer consumer cameras. It was heavily hyped in TV commercials, which have become nostalgic, just like the camera itself. They were trying to create a perception to get sales, but that doesn't diminish the value of this camera. Perception is reality, and to be honest, this camera is everything that those commercials claimed. If you are a fan of Canon film cameras but don't have one of these, you should immediately start looking for one in perfect condition, as the prices are going up fast. That's why I have not one but two of these. What do you think? Please let me know in the comments. And while you're there, please take one extra step and subscribe. Can you help me out with this unscientific survey? Just enter the right answer into the comments below and I'll aggregate them, okay?